C. Compare Vietnam with another country, because you're then using the language of comparison. It's actually the same in part 3 speaking. It's a good way to improve your band score, comparing your experience in Vietnam with what might happen in another country. All right, let's have a look at some writing then. So today we are going to look at 2 essay types that are appearing on the IELTS writing test a lot more frequently. And these are 2 views essays, which we'll look at first, and the second one is a 2-part question essay. Now, until about a few years ago, these essay types were on the test not very often at all. The most frequent types were an opinion essay, or agree, disagree, or advantages, disadvantages, and occasionally problem solutions. But in the last 2 to 3 years, a 2 views essay or a 2 question essay have started to appear a lot more. And I think there's 2 reasons for this. Firstly, these essay types are taught in schools in England for the GCSE test, which is at 16 years old, and the A-level test, which is at 18 years old. And the second reason is, I think it's simply to make the writing test more difficult, because these 2 essay types, for a lot of students, are a lot more difficult than maybe just an opinion essay or an advantages, disadvantages essay. So let's start looking at some examples. Now, I'm going to show you 2 or 3 examples of each essay type. Let's see the first one. So this is the British Council model example for this type of essay. The British Council is very good with supplying information and help to IELTS students, and these examples are available on their own website, or the IELTS part of their website, and I would always recommend students to go and look for them. So what have we got here? So discuss both points of view and give your opinion. So example question. Computers are being used more and more in education. Some people say that this is a positive trend, while others argue it is leading to negative consequences. Discuss both sides of the argument and then give your opinion. So let's look at the structure. So the introduction, like all IELTS essay introductions, should be 2 sentences. The first one is basically the topic by paraphrasing the question. And the second one is your thesis statement, in other words, your opinion. And you can also include the outline, in other words, what you're going to write about in the essay. But I often see students writing 3 sentences or even 4 or 5 sentences in an introduction. And there's absolutely no need to do that. 2 sentences is what the examiner wants from you. And when you think about it, you're not going to get any extra marks for a good introduction. You're going to get your marks for what you write in the body paragraphs. So a 2-sentence introduction is a requirement, and if you practice, you should be able to do it quickly and then get to the part of the essay where you're going to start getting some marks. So main body paragraph 1. So here we have a 5-sentence structure for the paragraph. So sentence 1, state the first viewpoint. So that's the first part of the question. And so in this case, computers are being used more and more in education. Discuss the viewpoint. Give a reason why you agree or disagree with the viewpoint. Give an example to support your view. And if you wish and you have the time, give a second example. Sentence 3, reason why you agree or disagree. You must be very clear in your point of view. You cannot say, I partly agree. If you do that, you'll lose marks. You must either agree or disagree. You can actually say, I agree more than that, than I disagree, but you must be very clear in your opinion. So, as I said, don't make the mistake of writing, I partly agree. And then the second body paragraph. So this is, first sentence is state the second viewpoint. And you notice the structure is the same, 5 sentences. With sentence 5, a second example being optional. And then the conclusion, well, you need to summarize. And then the second sentence, you need to state which one is better or more important. So let's have a look at the sample essay. So there we have in the introduction 2 sentences. There is an ever-increasing use of technological devices in the classroom, and it is often argued that this is a positive development, while others disagree and think this will lead to negative effects. So we just simply paraphrase the question. Notice we've not used the expression some people say, or another one some students use is nowadays. Those 2 expressions are regarded by the examiners as low level, and they will affect your vocabulary mark if you use them. And then we have the second sentence, the opinion. This essay agrees that an increase in technology is beneficial to students and teachers, and I will discuss both points of view. So a clear opinion, and then a statement of saying what the writer's going to do. Let's look at the first body paragraph. So notice how it's linked to the introduction with a phrase such as, it is clear that. It is clear that the internet has provided students with access to more information than ever before. So a clear statement to start the paragraph. And of course, it's focused on the topic in the question. Then we have a linking statement using moreover. Followed by an opinion. It is therefore agreed. And in this case, there is just one example. So the example being used is Wikipedia, which I'm sure you've all used. Then we move on to the second part of the question, and notice how it's linked together. So the linking word nevertheless is being used. And the writer is then discussing why many people disagree. And again, in this example, this paragraph is 4 sentences. And the examples being used to support the argument are Skype and Facebook. And then we move to the conclusion. So we have a summary sentence in the conclusion. And then we have the writer's opinion. Which view the writer thinks is the best of the two. So the structure is very simple. One or two of the words you might have not seen before, but overall, I think you'll agree it's fairly easy to read. And that is another important tip for good essay writing. You need to think about the person that's reading your essay and how easy it is for that person to read it. So that's the British Council example. Let's have a look at another one. So let's look at the introduction to this. Given opposing views and your opinion, both views type essay type. So this essay type, as I've mentioned before, is occurring a lot more frequently on the IELTS writing test. And for this kind of essay, you need to discuss two positions and then give your own point of view. Your own opinion can take one side or the other. You can partly agree with one or both. But as I said before, you must be very clear about your position, or even to disagree with both positions and offer an alternative view. And the second one, to disagree with the question. I think a lot of students actually are quite frightened of doing that, because they're basically in your writing at school, most of you would never do that. But it is acceptable to disagree with the question, as long as you explain why. So the key is to make sure that your opinion is clear. And as with all Task II essays, support your arguments with examples, reasons, and explanations. So let's have a look at another introduction, a question with an introduction. So here's a question that I recently saw on the IELTS test. Genetic engineering is an important issue in society today. Some people think that it will improve people's lives in many ways. Others feel that it may be a threat to life on Earth. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. So here's an introduction using my normal two-sentence technique. Again, notice how I started. It is true that genetic engineering is a key area of modern scientific research with broad implications for all human societies. While I accept that this field of technology may have its dangers, I believe the benefits of genetic engineering outweigh the drawbacks. So what I'm saying here is, I do partly agree that there is a danger, but I'm clearly saying, explaining what I believe. And that is what you must do. You must be very clear. So the first sentence introduces the topic, using paraphrasing and some extra information. The second sentence covers both views and makes my own opinion clear. So let's go back to the question and start looking at the body paragraphs. So what's the... So this is my essay outline. So we have the introduction, as you see before, paragraph 2. So this is what I'm going to write about in paragraph 2. The negative implications of genetic engineering are often discussed in terms of 2 key areas, which are food production and the cloning of humans. So the cloning of humans is basically scientists copying the DNA of humans to make a replica human. And then for paragraph 3, the topic sentence, a more optimistic prediction, and one that I favour, is that humans will find ways to mitigate the risks and use genetic technologies in a responsible way. And then my conclusion. So this is where I restate my opinion. I am convinced that genetic engineering will have a positive impact on our lives and that people's fears will be unwarranted. So that's my kind of essay outline or essay plan. And let's start looking at how that is translated into a complete essay. So there we have the question again, the introduction, and let's have a look at the complete paragraph. So the first sentence of the complete paragraph is my kind of plan or outline. And then I go on to explain about genetically modified crops, or sometimes called GM crops, and their impact on ecosystems, so that means the environment. And then a second sentence explaining how people are worried about genetic engineering and humans being modified or cloned. And then I give an example of people's fears about how cloned humans might be used. So one will be to fight wars, the other one will be for body part replacements. And then end with a sentence explaining how the implications of this is technology that's so new that maybe people have not thought through the implications and how it can change human society in a major way. And then let's move to body paragraph 3. So this, instead of looking at the positive, I've now gone more to the optimistic or positive. So a more optimistic prediction. So again, notice how I've linked the paragraphs together. And then I clearly say that this is the one that I favour, is that humans will always find ways to mitigate the risks and use genetic technologies in a responsible way. And then explain how genetic engineering in food production can be a solution to famine and people going hungry, maybe dying, and how different crops could be grown in environmentally more difficult conditions. So an example of this is in drier parts of Africa, where they have modified crops such as wheat. And so wheat can be grown using less water. And then I give a medical example and explain how cloning can be an advantage to humans in terms of medical development. And then to conclude, I have 2 sentences. So straight away, I restate my opinion. I am convinced is a very strong expression to use in a conclusion. And I always say to my students, use strong expressions when you're talking about your opinion. Don't just use the everyday ones like I believe. You know, to me, they sound really weak. You need a strong expression such as I am convinced. Or if you're going to use believe, right, I strongly believe that. That's another good one that the examiners like to see. So, in conclusion, I am convinced that genetic engineering will have a positive impact on our lives. Hopefully, in the future, people's fears will be unwarranted as the positive effects become clearer. So, by writing hopefully, I go back to the first body paragraph where people do worry about these developments, but I'm saying that hopefully over time that people will not be as worried. As usual, all these slides are available to everybody. Just ask GLN Centre and they'll send you a copy or make a copy available to you. Let's have a look at another example. So artificial intelligence, I've seen questions about artificial intelligence appearing both in on the speaking test and on the writing test in the last few months. And quite recently, Elon Musk, who's becoming a very important man in terms of modern technology, he's had an article written for him in an American newspaper explaining how he's worried about it. So let's have a look at the question. Some people believe that developments in the field of artificial intelligence will have a positive impact on our lives in the near future. Others, by contrast, are worried that we are not prepared for a world in which computers are more intelligent than humans. So discuss both these views and give your opinion. So again, don't rush to write an essay without doing a plan. So before, in the previous example, I showed you my outline plan. And here is a much simpler way of planning your answer. So you should prepare some ideas and opinions about artificial intelligence. And here are some questions that maybe encourage you to prepare these ideas. So what does artificial intelligence mean? Can you give any examples of it? What benefits might artificial intelligence bring? What are the potential drawbacks or dangers? And what is your opinion? And as part of your preparation for doing the IELTS test in the future, you could take various topics and do the same, you know. So topics that appear on the IELTS test a lot are things of education, the environment, the behavior of people, maybe people when they're on holiday, or the behavior of people generally in society is another topic that seems to appear on the test more often these days. Another one is crime. So, you know, it only takes you a few minutes to write down a few ideas. So let's have a look at the outline. So we're back to the question. And here's my outline again, my planning outline. So, introduction, people seem to be either excited or worried about the future impact of artificial intelligence. Personally, I can understand the two opposing points of view. I am both fascinated by developments in artificial intelligence and apprehensive about its possible negative effects. So, I'm clearly saying that both points of view are important, they're relevant. So let's have a look at this first body paragraph, or paragraph 2. So it is clear that the increase in intelligence of technology should bring some obvious benefits. And then for the next body paragraph, I go to the next point of view. Nevertheless, I share the concerns of people who believe that artificial intelligence may harm us if we are not careful. And then in my conclusion, while intelligent machines will no doubt improve our lives in many ways, the potential risks of such technology should not be ignored. So, just a little tip to remember: the essay outline should make sense on its own, providing the reader with a summary of your answer. So the only thing missing from your essay outline is a detailed explanation of after each main paragraph topic sentence. So let's go to looking at the paragraphs. So again, we're looking at 5 sentences here, which is like what the British Council advises students to do. So the first topic sentence, I share concerns about potential harm. Idea 1, a short-term rise in unemployment as workers are replaced. So a good example of that could be the motor car industry, which uses a lot of technology, and the number of workers these days to produce a car is a lot less than 20 years ago. So idea 1, short-term rise in unemployment as workers are replaced. So here I've given the example of self-driving vehicles replacing driving jobs. Idea 2, the medium-term effects, humans lose skills and purpose. And idea 3, the long-term worry, computers take over and make decisions. So if we look at the example of self-driving vehicles, actually I was reading in a British newspaper 2 or 3 days ago how next year they do expect self-driving vehicles to be on the roads in the UK. And that is going to mean a lot of people lose their jobs. So here's the paragraph, and I've highlighted each part, the short term, the medium term, and the longer term view. And examiners do like some questions answered in this way, because by going from the short term to the medium term to long term, you are doing what's called showing progression in your ideas, and they'd like to see that. It shows that the essay is well organized. All right, and here we have the full essay. So again, in the introduction, there is a strong opinion. Personally, I can understand. And then notice how we start the body paragraph, which is clear that, and followed by the topic. And then we talk about machines and their impact. Then an example, use of robots. And then talk about the advantages of these machines and how it could in the future steadily improve our quality of life. And here we have the paragraph that shows a progression from the short term to the medium term to the longer term. So in the short term, self-driving vehicles are expected to cause redundancies in driving jobs such as lorry drivers, taxi drivers and bus drivers. Then we move to the medium term. And then why people get worried about the longer term is that computers could become so intelligent that they begin to make decisions without human oversight and without regard to our well-being. And then the conclusion. And as always, it's a two-sentence conclusion. So, the first sentence, I clearly state what I believe. Machines will no doubt improve our lives in many ways, although the potential risks of these technologies should not be ignored. And then I write what I hope about these will happen to these potential risks in the future. And what I've done here is I've listed some of the vocabulary I used. I think most students would understand nearly all of this vocabulary. I'm not using any unusual words that I've taken out of a dictionary. I'm using everyday language. And again, that's what the examiners like to see. We have a second slide. The word de-skilled you might not have seen before, or the phrase human oversight. But the rest of it, I'm quite sure that nearly all of you would have seen this vocabulary before. All right, so that's two views essays. Let's go to the other one, which is two-part question essays. So again, we start with the British Council model example. Again, they use the 4 or 5 sentence paragraph, depending if you give one example or two examples. The introduction again is 2 sentences. So main body paragraph 2. So you answer the second question. Again, an optional second example. And then 2 sentences for the conclusion. And here is the British Council model answer. So clearly what the writer believes is there in the introduction. And then again, notice how the paragraphs are linked together. So this one example begins with the two most important things. And this is a good paragraph because it gives a real life example from a survey conducted by monster.com. And if you can give real life examples like that, the examiners are very positive when they see these. And then the second body paragraph. Notice again how it's linked with regard to the question of happiness for all workers. And this paragraph also gives a real life example from the London Times newspaper. And then if we move to the conclusion, again, two sentences. And a clear opinion. So let's have a look at one of my essay types. So here's the introduction. Generally, with this type of task to essay, you will need to consider your response to a statement in two ways. One objective and the other subjective. The first question might ask you to set out causes, problems, or reasons behind a particular situation, and the second might ask you to give your opinion or say how much you agree with the statement. So a good structure would be introduction, answer the first question, answer the second question, and conclusion. And for this essay task, it is important to be concise. Limit yourself to 2, possibly 3 main ideas for each paragraph, and develop them fully. So this is basically 2 essays in one. Each paragraph is a separate essay. And quite often, the way that the question is set, the 2 questions are not directly connected, only indirectly connected. So you cannot mix the 2 paragraphs, they must be clearly separate, right? One paragraph answering the first question and the second paragraph answering the second question. If you try to cross-correlate or mix them, then it's going to get confusing and you'll lose marks for coherence. So let's have a look at this essay question. And we're going to do a kind of little investigation here of what the candidate has done or not done. So a question, social media has completely changed the way family and friends communicate with each other. What are the reasons for this? And is this a positive or negative development? So this example here, we have an introduction. This has not been written by me, it's been written by, it's a student example. And straight away, I can see that the introduction is 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. Straight away, it's 5 sentences. And they're basically all simple sentences. So the examiner doesn't like to see short sentences like this all the time. The examiner wants to see a mixture of simple and complex. So let's look at the first question. Does the candidate make their position on the statement clear? Well, the answer is only in part. So the candidate makes it clear they believe social media to have a positive effect. However, they do not answer the question that's been given. As a result, they state that the position they state relates to their argument, but not about the one they should be writing about. So the writer has said that in the many downsides to this development, but I believe that overall it has had a positive effect on our lives. Well, that is not the question. The question is, what is the effect on family and friends communicating with each other? So straight away, this student has got a problem. In other words, the question's not been directly answered. Let's have a look at the next part. So here's the first body paragraph. And then a question. Did the candidate answer the first question correctly? And the answer is no. The candidate begins well by describing how it has become easier for people to communicate at any time of the day. They go on to state what they see as a second reason for the usefulness or benefit of social media. But again, it doesn't relate to the question, which focuses on relationships between family and friends, not performers and their fans. And again, this is a problem that I find quite often with some students. They don't directly answer the question. And here we have the second question being answered. Again, did the candidate answer the second question correctly? So is this a positive or negative development? And again, the answer is no. The example the candidate has given does not actually relate to the question. Rather than explaining how useful social media is in strengthening relationships between family and friends, they have actually written about how useful it is to own a mobile phone. And when we look at the conclusion, does the conclusion summarize the essay correctly? Again, the answer is no. The candidate mentions that there are negative sides in both the introduction and conclusion, but the main body of the essay only discusses the positives. So, although I would agree the essay is fairly well written, it does tick a lot of the boxes that the British Council requires for essay structure. Although, as I pointed out, the introduction is wrong. 5 sentences for an introduction is not a good idea. But the general standard of writing is good. But the problem is the question has not been fully answered. And this will mean that as a result, the candidate will get, despite it being a good essay, the candidate will get 5.5 overall, or maybe a band 6, because the standard of vocabulary and grammar is good. So that's the end of looking at the examples today. I'll just end with a few final tips. So the first one is that I've kind of mentioned in this morning. Many people are confused by the idea that they are doing the IELTS academic writing test. They think that this means they need to use academic words, or that IELTS writing is similar to university academic writing. So all of this is wrong, and here's why. Examiners are not looking for academic words. There's nothing in the scoring or marking criteria that tells examiners to do this. Instead, examiners are told to look for a wide range of vocabulary, collocations, and some less common vocabulary. So again, as I mentioned before, IELTS writing, especially Task II, is more like high school writing rather than a university assignment. It's based on, as I said, on the GCSE and A-level tests in England. So in a university assignment, for example, you will never see the question, do you agree or disagree? At university, you're expected to use research as the basis of your writing. But in the IELTS test, you have your own ideas and opinions. You are even told that you can use examples from your own personal experience in IELTS Writing Task II. And this isn't very academic. So it's best to ignore the word academic. Ignore any advice that relates to university academic writing. IELTS writing has its own rules and requirements. And another point to make from here is the examiner is not interested in your opinion. You will not get extra marks or lose marks if the examiner disagrees with your opinion. The examiner is interested in how you answer the question and how you structure your reply to the question. You do not get any extra marks for your opinion. However, as I mentioned, you must demonstrate in your essay that you have a clear, strong opinion. Another problem with students is relying too much on linking. So this morning I've highlighted linking phrases. So if you start every sentence of your essay with a typical linking word, such as firstly, furthermore, moreover, your writing will seem mechanical. In other words, you're writing to a formula, and you probably won't get higher than a band 6 for coherence and cohesion, which is 25% of your score. You might even get a band 5 for this. So the opposite extreme is to use none of the typical linking words. The only problem with this way of writing is that you need to be an advanced user of English to do it well. It's the kind of thing that a native speaker like me or a Band 9 candidate might do. So most candidates should aim to be somewhere between these two extremes. Try to use linking words in a natural way. It makes sense to use furthermore when you're adding an idea, and it makes sense to use for an example, when you are giving an example. And notice in a couple of the essays, paragraphs began with nevertheless, which is another good linking word to use. In short, linking words are useful, but you shouldn't rely on them. They are not going to impress the examiner or magically give you a high score. And with my students, I spend a lot of time on linking words and phrases because some of those that you're taught at school, really, they're just wrong. They're not appropriate for IELTS essay writing. So, most people learn linking words like firstly, furthermore, moreover, however, whereas, and there's nothing wrong with this type of linking. I sometimes use it myself. Another way to link ideas between or within sentences is to use pronouns and determiners like it, they, which, this and that. And actually in England, this is what teenagers are taught for the A-level tests. And perhaps the most advanced form of linking involves no linking words at all. Instead, you should rely on topic vocabulary itself to create cohesion. And I call this the art of linking without linking. And here we have an example. So I've used a lot of colour here to emphasize the linking. So, to finish, I've used different coloured highlighting to show which phrases are connected. So, for example, the phrases in blue all develop the idea of reduced human interaction. Can you see how the vocabulary itself holds a paragraph together? This is probably how you write in your own language. So, let's just have one more look. Here's what I call my 4 rules for introductions. So, write 2 sentences, introduce the topic, then give a general answer. In these 2 sentences, you should briefly mention everything that the question mentions. Demonstrate that you can paraphrase the ideas of the question. Don't save any surprises for the conclusion. Give your opinion in the introduction if the question asks for it. So most IELTS writing questions do ask for your opinion. And you must put it in the introduction when the question asks for your opinion. You must do that. Otherwise, that will have a major impact on your band score. Make your position clear. So I've said several times, you have to make your position clear throughout the essay. So it's not just a matter of making your position clear in the introduction and in the conclusion. You should also make your position clear in the main paragraphs. And the British Council examples you've seen do focus on that in the body paragraphs. Focus. IELTS students often worry too much about grammar. They think they need to fill their essays with passives, conditionals, compound sentences, complex sentences, etc. So I tell my students not to think about these things. Instead, we focus on vocabulary and use it to express our ideas well and make sure that we answer the question. Because vocabulary ideas was my main focus when I wrote some of these examples that you've seen. And I think we're coming to the last slide today. Yes. So style. So I consider Task 2 essays to be high school style essays rather than university essays. Well, IELTS is the academic IELTS test is really a university entry test. So they don't expect you to write like a student at university. They expect you to write like a student at high school. So the difference here is because you're writing about your own ideas and opinions, you don't have access to any research like you would have at university. Task 2 essays should be clear and easy to read with a focus on relevant ideas and good topic vocabulary. You won't have time to develop the kind of detailed arguments that a university teacher would expect. So imagine that you're writing for your high school teacher. So we're coming to the end of today's presentation. As I said before, if you would like a copy of the slides, then GLN are quite happy to let you have a copy. Next week is going to be speaking. I will be giving you some examples of Part 3 speaking questions that are currently on the speaking test and will continue on the speaking test until December this year. So I hope you found it useful and learned something, and good luck with your studying, and I hope you have a good day.
Hiện tại thì lớp học ngày hôm nay thì đã kết thúc. Thì hy vọng là với những chia sẻ của thầy Terry trong buổi ngày hôm nay về Writing Task II thì mọi người có thể là thu được cho mình những cái kiến thức mà cần thiết để có thể cải thiện và đạt được cái điểm số mong muốn cho cái phần bài viết phần 2 này. Và trong tuần tới, thứ Bảy tuần tới từ khung giờ 10 đến 11 giờ thì sẽ là buổi cuối cùng cho cái khóa học IELTS trực tuyến cùng với cả thầy Terry do GLN tổ chức. Nội dung của buổi học trong tuần tới là sẽ về Speaking Part 3. Vì thế là mình hy vọng là tất cả các bạn có thể tham gia đúng giờ để có thể thu cho mình những các cái kiến thức mà vô cùng là giá trị từ cựu giám khảo chấm thi của BC và IDP là thầy Terry Wilson. Chúc mọi người có một cuối tuần vui vẻ và hẹn gặp mọi người vào thứ Bảy tuần sau. Bye bye Terry.
Bye bye.
Có bao nhiêu bạn tham gia hả chị? Biết được chưa?
Từ từ.